Both sides of the conversation, family. We welcome you to this virtual space crafted especially for you. My name is Jada Curry, and I'm Both Sides of the Conversation's marketing director and graphics design specialist. I want to take some time to ground us all as a community into this space we are about to open up in, so let's go through our community standards. Both Sides of the Conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation, so we ask that you all be respectful of that. We also ask that you be respectful of each panelist, host, and participant. We do encourage healthy debates and conversations. Don't personalize anything with anyone. This includes name-calling, bullying, trolling, or shaming. This will not be allowed or tolerated. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but show respect. These community standards apply to all of our live shows and any virtual spaces that we hold on social media, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We want to make sure that we are caring for each other as a community. This is our priority in all of our endeavors as both sides of the conversation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's show and continue to stay in touch with us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all of them. All right, thank you for listening and see you soon.
Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. It is Educational Thursday here at Both Sides of the Conversation, and I am your host for tonight, Ayana. As you all see, John and Tony are not with us this evening, so you are stuck here with me. And today we have an awesome show for you all. As you know, Educational Thursday is a day that we get the opportunity to educate the community and provide information that is essential for the betterment of our Black and Brown people. And tonight we have Dr. Battles here with us. But before we introduce her and have her educate our community, let's go over some world announcements. There's a lot of things happening out here in the world. So our first announcement is the DEA finds thousands of fentanyl pills packed in Legos toys. Tuesday, a DEA task force in Manhattan found 15,000 fentanyl pills packed in 2 black bags inside the Legos box, which was in the back of a rented car near Hudson Yards, the New York Post reported. Only a few weeks have passed since the thousands of rainbow-colored fentanyl pills were found inside candy packaging. As Halloween approaches, the DEA is warning families and parents to be careful during this during this Halloween time. Make sure we keep our kids safe. Next, a Virginia NAACP leader was shot to death while vacationing in Turks and Caicos. A respected NAACPer by the name of Ken Carter was brutally killed during an attack when the car he was riding in was ambushed in Turks and Caicos. It's related to some gang violence. So let's send some prayers out to his family and to all the people and all the victims that was involved in this situation. The next world event is President Biden outlines a 3-step plan to decriminalize marijuana. President Biden has announced a new plan to decriminalize marijuana, which includes pardoning all prior federal possession offenses. Biden's 3-step plan will ultimately change the classification of marijuana under federal law to ensure that future offenses do not land citizens in federal prison. So let's see if Biden will stick to this, and let's see if it'll help some of our Black and brown people that have been affected by this. Next, we have our community events. So we have a lot of community events here in the Bay Area and actually within the United States. So one of our first events is Investing in Economic Rights for All, Thursday, October 6th and 7th. For more information, please visit Eventbrite. Next, we have Life is Living Festival, Saturday, October 8th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and that is at the Bobby Hutton Park here in West Oakland. Next, we have the Pop-Up Village, and that will be Saturday, October 8th from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., and that'll be in San Francisco. Please see below for more information. Next, we have the San Francisco Public Defender's Office Clean Slate Program Expungement Workshop, and that'll be Thursday, October 13th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Please see below for more information. Next, we have the San Francisco High School Middle School Fair. Learn more about the application process and financial aid for SF area top schools open to all 5th and 8th graders. That'll be Friday, October 14th, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Boys and Girls Club in San Francisco. Please see below for more information on who to contact to get your youth involved in that. The next event is Step to Health, which will be Saturday, October 15th, 11 to 3 p.m. at Booker T. Washington Community Service Center, and that'll be in San Francisco. Please email Ryan for more information. The next event is the 100 College Prep 2023 HBCU College Tour Informational Meeting, and that'll be Monday, October 17th, and Thursday, November 17th from 6 p.m. At 6 p.m., and that'll be held in San Francisco. So please bring your high school students out there so that they can be a part of the college tour for HBCUs. The next event is All Good in the Hood Pumpkin Patch. Yes, this looks like some fun. October 21st, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., and that'll be in San Francisco. Our next event is the Mount Rose City of Refuge, first annual breast cancer 5K walk run, Saturday, October 22nd from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And that is in Crosby, Texas. So please see below for more information. The next event is the grand opening block party. Come see what's new in the Bayview. Saturday, October 22nd, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. You all go check it out. That is my old neighborhood. I know they're going to have some awesome things. So you all please go support Bayview. The next one is Ocean Avenue Halloween Block Party and Ethnic Toy Drive. October 22nd from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. will be the block party, and then the ethnic toy drive will be 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., and that'll be at the Ave Bar in San Francisco. The next event is the Halloween event, and that'll be October 27th from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., and that'll be in San Francisco. Our next event is the Wizardly Night Friday, October 28th, 4 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., and that'll be in San Francisco as well. Our next event is the Parenting and Poverty Justice Rally, Saturday, October 29th, 2 p.m., and that'll be in Sacramento at our state capitol. So please go out there, let your voice be heard. Please support this cause. The next event will be the high school test prep class, open to all 7th and 8th graders. It will be prepared to take the placement test for the HSPT exam classes, which start in October. For more information, please email the email address below. All right, the next event is the monkeypox vaccinations. Will be available every Thursday from 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. in San Francisco. Our next event is the Peace Park Presents Friday Night Fun every Friday, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., and that'll be at the Hamilton Rec Center in San Francisco. Another fun event will be the Saturday Family Fun Day, field trips, sporting events, and much more every second and fourth Saturday. For more information, please email sfrebels1990@gmail.com. Our next event is the 33rd annual Peewee Basketball League registration. They're currently looking for volunteer coaches. The league will start the first week of October, so it started. Please visit www.rebels.org for more information. Please volunteer and help out our youth. Our next event is the San Francisco Smart Money Coaching. Free confidential financial guidance for anyone living, working, or receiving services in San Francisco. To schedule an appointment, call 877-256-0073. Now is the time to get our finances in order. So please reach out, schedule your appointment. The next event is Celebrating Black Culture. There is a $7,500 mini grant for funding Black culture preservation events in the Tenderloin, Lakeview, Sunnydale, Visitation Valley, and OMI areas. For more information, please visit the site below to apply for the grant. I know the deadline is coming up, so please reach out and find out more and apply for those grants. Now, both sides of the conversation, we have our own GoFundMe. So BSOTC Capacity Building Fundraiser. Please visit our GoFundMe page and make a donation today. Please see the link below. We really need your help. All right, so those are all of our community events. Now I will get into the BSOTC. So both sides of the conversation is in search of volunteers. We need your help, community. Our work is inspiring and it feels good. We make a difference in the community with tangible results to show it. We are a highly driven group with high impact. We get the right things done the right way. Not only will you contribute to the community, but you will also learn a lot and gain knowledge in your field of interest with the organization. We value your ideas and input. Sign up to be a volunteer. You can make a difference. And again, we need you. We need the support of the community. Come out here and volunteer with us. Now, you also can support both sides of the conversation while you shop online. Amazon Smile donates 0.5% of your eligible purchases on Amazon to BSOTC. All you need to do is start your shopping at smile.amazon.com and choose BSOTC as your charitable donate organization, and the donation will be made at no extra cost to you. So it's totally free. So just add us there when you're shopping so that we can get that donation, and we really appreciate it, and we thank you in advance. Next, please go to all of our social media sites for more news on how to give back to your community and support both sides of the conversation. Thank you all. Now, for our upcoming shows, we have some great shows coming up. So on Sunday, we have our awesome youth coming back to give their perspective, and their show will be about domestic violence. Since this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, our youth will be bringing that conversation to you all, and that'll be Sunday, October 9th at 4 p.m. So please come out, we'll tune in and support our youth. Next, we have our Hidden Gem / Community Spotlight. So next Tuesday will be a special segment. So again, that's Tuesday, October 11th. So at 5:30, we'll have elected as San Francisco public defender Mano Ruja, who will be here. And then at 7:30, we'll have Yakpasua Zazaboy, who will be running for the city council of Oakland's District 6. So they'll be here. So please tune in at 5:30 and 7:30. Okay. Thank you so much for pushing through with me through all of these announcements and world events. Thank you all so much. And now we're going to get to Dr. Battles. Dr. Battles is an amazing woman with a lot of information, and she's doing great things in the community. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up the lovely Dr. Battles. Dr. Battles, unmute your mic for me.
Sounding like Zoom days. Unmute your mic. Yes.
Oh, you're fine. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here today.
We are definitely glad to have you. So tell us about what you do, and tell the community what you do.
Well, I am Dr. Melanie Desme Battles. I am the CEO and lead consultant, lead consultant for Scholars for the Soul, an educational solutions firm. And we work with schools, districts, and organizations on how to be culturally responsive and also how to enact transformative social emotional learning.
Thank you. Okay, that sounds good. Awesome work. So I know you have a slideshow that you wanted to share with the community. Should we bring that up now?
Yeah, we can bring that up now. Let me put it on with you. All right. Okay, boom. All right. So I'm glad to be here tonight because I think it's important for us to really get into understanding why culturally responsive teaching is an important way of being that should be normalized in every school setting, especially for our students who come from diverse backgrounds. So some of you who may be familiar with education, or you may have seen some things rolling around on social media, I wanted to put this together to kind of distinguish, but also show the large similarities between some different frameworks. So in my practice and the work that I do in schools and districts, I work through all of these. And they're all very commingled. So if you look in the middle, they're all centered around justice, healing, providing equity, or using equity as the vehicle for justice and healing, engaging in soul work, meaningful and healthy and productive relationships, and then adult modeling. Those concepts in the middle are important for every one of those concepts or frameworks on the outside. My bread and butter and what I absolutely enjoy doing with schools and districts is culturally responsive teaching. So you hear that a lot. There's another phrase called culturally relevant teaching or pedagogy. So we have Black woman scholar Dr. Gloria Lansing Billings, who came out with a book in 1995 called Dream Keepers. And in this book, she did research with Black teachers of Black students, African American students. And what she found were distinct practices that really moved the needle instructional wise with those students. We all may be familiar. There is what is called an achievement gap. I don't use the term achievement gap. I use the term opportunity gap because we have to look at the environment. Look at the classroom environment, look at the quality of instruction, look at teacher attitudes and the relationships that students have with education. In this pandemic, because we're still very much in the pandemic, even though if you go outside, it may not look that way because a lot of people are not wearing masks or doing those kind of things anymore. But in this situation of our country, there has been an illumination of issues that are happening, primarily as it comes to instructional equity. When everybody had to go home and there was this blanketed expectation that everyone had access to internet. Everyone had access to a device. And what was found was that, or everyone, even when I say everyone, I mean students and families, everyone also had an environment that was conducive for learning. And what was found out from some, but what others also, such as myself, already knew, was that these things were already a problem before the pandemic began. And it's not just the issues that children and families are trying to struggle through and push through at home. It's also the fact that you got to see a lot of what was happening in the classrooms. Families got to see the gap, why some of the students were not able to understand the concepts or the content that was being brought forth in the schools. I was still in an instructional coach position during the pandemic, and I was still working in the district. And I was the frontline contact for parents because of our school's access to a grant. And I dealt with instructional technology coaching. So I dealt a lot with the families and what they were dealing with. And what I found out is that a lot of teachers were having a hard time connecting and getting things done with students. And primarily, what you saw was a gap in student relationships with their teachers, which is the building block. So when I talk about culturally responsive teaching, we're getting into understanding how the actual brain works, right? So I'm going to take this screen down. I just wanted people to get an idea of what those conversations are and what those concepts and those big concepts are. But when we talk about culturally responsive teaching, what we're looking at is how are we using our knowledge of the brain? Because the brain is the organ that drives the functionality of our bodies. But it is also connected to our spirit, to our mindsets, right? To our souls. Scholars for the Soul, the name is very intentional because if you are a soul scholar, you are one who is a critical thinker. You are one who strives to connect the soul to the learning environment, right? And so what we think about when we talk about being a soul scholar and we talk about being culturally responsive, we first have to understand the brain. So I'm going to give y'all a little mini PD. This is kind of the information that I go into when I go in schools and I work with districts about how to help instruction. Because the issue is, before I get into that, the issue is that there is a gap in instructional equity. And what do I mean by that? We can make students feel great, right? We can allow or create or cultivate environments where students feel loved. Students feel as though they belong. And that's important. That is a foundation. So what I'm about to say next does not take away from that. But the needle that's not being moved as a whole is in instruction. If your instruction does not align with the way our brain processes new information, and then you are not able to embed culture with cognition. Cognition means the way we think, the way we learn, the way our brain processes information. If you do not connect culture with cognition, you will have students who are enjoying themselves in the classroom, but not learning a thing. They're learning to be 100% or even 75 to 100% reliant on their teachers. So their hands are always raised because they're unable to be self-starters. They don't have very much self-determination. They don't know how to use the internet because we tell kids a lot, oh, you got the internet now. I didn't have all this. But that's a resource they don't know how to use. It takes cognition. It takes information processing to know how to choose reliable sources on the internet, how to know what is a good source for what I'm looking for, how to search keywords. All of those are mental processes. And dependent students do not know how to engage in cognitive processing that will help them get themselves to take ownership of the learning. So then we wonder why students do not enjoy learning. Many students, I won't say all, many students and it is, the rates are bigger in our Black and brown communities, do not enjoy the beauty of learning. Because Zaretta Hammond in Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain says only the learner learns. If they don't see themselves as learners, if they don't understand that learning is a joy and a journey, and if they've always experienced educational trauma and educational neglect, they won't be the self-starters that you want them to be. They won't see the connection to the real world. And so again, this takes us back to instructional equity. If we are not creating instruction that actually reaches the brain and allows information to process from the limbic region of the brain, or starting in the reptilian to the limbic, to the neocortex regions of the brain, that moves information by connecting previous background knowledge to current knowledge and creating a bridge that brings the two together, then we won't have what we are looking for when we say we want to close this achievement gap. So it's not that students are unable to do the work. It's not that students don't have the intellectual abilities. It's about us as educators building their intellective capacity. So in the brain, and I'm going to give y'all this little mini lesson. In the brain, you have, if you've ever seen a picture of the brain, is those folded, wrinkly, gray looking space, right? They call it gray matter. The technical term is termed neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity. That means we all, unless there's been some sort of traumatic brain injury or something, very extreme, the typical or the neurotypical brain, even the neurotypical or the neurodivergent brain, even those brains, right? Meaning those students who are autistic or who have different learning capacities that don't fit into our norms. And I say quotes purposely because language is important and how we say things is important. But that gray matter, we have it, and it has the ability to stretch and to unfold, right? Because it's folded up, it's bunched up. That's why children ages 0 to 5, I say 0, birth to 5, their brains, that's the time where their brains grow the most. They're learning language, they're learning meaning, they're learning faces, they're learning a lot of things. And they do these things by being curious. This is an issue that we have in education, is because as children get older, we begin to stigmatize curiosity. We begin to make them feel as though being curious is too dangerous. And oftentimes as parents, when we got kids around the house, their curiosity, we have to protect them because they will hurt themselves, right? They will harm themselves. But when we think about it in education, we've got to get into reigniting that curiosity for our students, creating a space where they're brave enough to explore their curiosities. So in the brain, with that neuroplasticity, the only way that it's stretched, meaning the only way that we learn and grow in the brain, is through challenge, through novel concepts, that newness, right? Through those things that are intriguing, through things that are relevant, and we feel have a special kind of connection to our world. So when we say culturally responsive teaching, I break the framework down for educators to take them through this Ready for Rigor framework by researcher Zaretta Hammond. And she gives it in these stages: ignite, chunk, chew, and review. So when new knowledge comes in, we all have a reticular activating system in our brain. It's in the oldest section of the brain called the reptilian brain. It's the brain that we had when we had to just survive, when we had to just see things and respond, right? So it's also the brain that acts up. If you hear a noise and you're in the dark, you don't know where the noise came from. If you're in an unfamiliar space, or you've had experiences before that didn't make you feel safe in that moment, you respond automatically without thinking, right? Some of our responses are automatic. We do the things because we're going through paying attention to what is important, what can get our attention, what can alert us. So, as educators, how are you tapping your instruction into that alertness of the student? How are we creating environments where we are thinking deliberately, not just read a book, answer questions, do work? How are we creating? I heard somebody say this, who's revolutionizing education. I can't remember who the Black man was, but they said we're not getting students to do work. They are engaging in bodies of work, right? So it's not just about sitting and being productive. It's about being in the space of who you are, who your identity is as a human in this world, as a person who may be of a marginalized community, whether that's due to race, due to ethnicity, due to gender identification, due to sexuality, religion, I think I said that, economic status, class, power, all of those things, right? Identity work is important to the work of education. If students don't see themselves in the work, they won't engage meaningfully with the work. Some of our students are good students because they are people pleasers. They want to do well to please their teacher, to please their parents, not because they enjoy the learning environment. So it boggles my mind, and it bothers my soul because I hear examples of students who are just doing work and not engaging in bodies of work that will transform the way they see the world, that will catalyze them into being powerful beings who are here to enjoy the world, but also to change current conditions of inequality and oppression. So when we go from the reptilian portion of the brain, now we move into the limbic region. And this is the part that we have to know and understand in order for us to engage students to take intellectual risk. So before I get into risk taking, there's a section of the brain that is in this limbic region, right? So you have the thalamus, which is where you have a communication. It's like a dispatch hub. So remember I said in the reticular activating system, it's alerting. It's like a little detector. What should I pay attention to? What's worth looking at? What's worth even noticing and naming? And then when we see that thing, now that thing is going to communicate to our brain through the thalamus. It's going to communicate to our brain a certain meaning. We filter our meanings based on our experiences and based on our culture and ways of being. So here's an example. Black folks, if we see people running, make me think about Kings of Comedy. We see people running. We see a couple people running. What we gonna do? Get Lisa now. It's time to start running, right? This is a joke between me and my sister. We always laugh about that part in Kings of Comedy. If y'all know about Kings of Comedy, chime in, because y'all know when Black people see people running, as a whole, generally, we're going to take off running. We're not asking questions. We're not having long conversations. We do all that at the end because our experience is telling us whether we had that experience or whether somebody passed it on to us. And then we can get into epigenetics and how things are passed on through our DNA. Whatever the passing on is, there's a schema, there's a script for certain things that happen that we pay attention to. And in the thalamus, it communicates to the brain, right? And as it communicates to the brain, there's two other sections that play a part. You have your hippocampus, which is like your memory center. You got your short term, your working memory, your long term. And I go into this conversation deeply with teachers because you only have, I'm not going to give all of the specifics out, but when you're teaching, you only have a set amount of time to get new information in, to make sure it connects, to practice it, and to get it to moving into working memory. A lot of times teachers are frustrated because you up there talking all day and it's said in the short term and you come back the next day, your babies remember absolutely nothing. They remember very little of what you taught. Why? Because you did not understand how to engage their culture with the way the brain works in taking in new information, playing around with it, gamifying it, using stories, right? Doing role play, getting the body up, engaging in rigorous, meaning bodies moving, songs, chants, poetry, touching stuff, maker spaces, tinkering. You didn't engage in any of those. You just had students sitting there listening and maybe a turn and talk, and that's it. But that's not how the brain works. The brain needs to engage in something. And for it to become a part of your long-term memory, it needs to engage in repetition. Doesn't always have to be done the same way, but the concept needs to be played with often. Think about when you learned back in the day. I'm 38. So back in the day, we had to memorize our multiplication facts. We didn't use no calculators like that. Now they can use calculators all the time. No, you had to memorize by maybe I think it was fourth grade. You had to memorize your multiplication facts. Now, if you had a cool teacher, they might have put a song to it, a little bop. That's only if you had a really good one. Otherwise, you had to take that paper home like I did. You had to read them. You had to make flashcards. Your mama said them back and forth to you. You and your brothers and sisters, everybody went over the multiplication facts. And then guess what? You use them in every grade after that. You never stopped multiplying in math. You never stopped. You continued to use that same skill set. So now, as an adult, you know what 3 times 4 is. You know 9 times 8. You know 12 times 12. You know them like that. Because where did they go? From the short term to the working and then into the long term, right? And this is actually moving from the back of your brain going forward, right? Like literally, the neurons are connecting. They are called messengers of the brain. And the more you practice deliberately with a concept, you create a footpath in the brain. Then the footpath becomes a street, a little pebbled road. Then it becomes a highway where it's real nice and clean. They just did the highway, right? The pavement is clear. So now the messages are on that highway and they go clearly and freely back and forth. So as you get new information, I'm sticking with math because it's something you can really see. So as you learn the Pythagorean theorem, you don't have to go back and know how to multiply, what is it, a plus b x squared or something. I don't remember the whole theory because I didn't have to use it that much, right? But you don't have to explain to most students that multiply means multiplying. You only have to do that when the mark has been missed and the student did not get enough time to play and practice with the skill of multiplying. So it did not move into working memory, right? It did not move into long-term memory. So then we also have, we have the thalamus, we have the hippocampus, which is your Wikipedia of the brain, is what Zaretta Hammond calls it. It's the Wikipedia of the brain. Then you have your amygdala. This is the part where social emotional learning plays a big role. Because when we talk about social emotional learning, we're looking at 5 skill sets: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship building or community building, and decision making. In those 5 competencies, you are working deliberately with students to recognize the brilliance that is within them, to understand they are little baby geniuses or little teenage geniuses who all have brains, who can all learn. It doesn't matter what community they come from. It doesn't matter what background they have. You're working with them to work within the scope of their identities. So that means you got to do a lot of confrontational work when it comes to implementing social emotional learning. This is a K through 12 skill that automatically transfers into the workplace. There is research by Castle, CASEL.org. They are a leading research firm and provide a lot of resources. And they've done research to show that employers need for people to have social emotional learning skills. What are some of these skills? Showing and fostering empathy, compassion, kindness, understanding other perspectives and diverse perspectives, anti-racism. Excuse me. These are the kind of skills. But what's happening in the education system is there is a whitewashing of social emotional learning that deliberately ignores the social context of Black and Brown students. In addition to those Black and Brown students whose identities intersect with other marginalized identities, when you're talking about your LGBTQIA communities, when you're talking about religions other than the Christian religion, which is the normalized, accepted way of the United States, right? When you're going against anything that's other than the white male Eurocentric perspective, everybody else is pushed into the margin, right? Some have more privilege than others, but when you're looking at the intersection of those identities, a lot of people in schools are not wanting to discuss. You can't tell a student who's a Black student to just be kind, and you got racism happening on the playground. You can't tell a student to show empathy, but then you're not showing them the beauty in diverse perspectives, backgrounds, identities. You're not confronting the things that Black and Brown students don't get to evade. See, some students get to live in a bubble. Some students are afforded a privilege of safety in an ongoing basis. They don't have to worry about poverty. They don't have to worry about being Black and getting pulled over. I literally just read an article before this show about Black high school students. Sean King posted it. And the boy was shot 4 times. Thankfully, he survived. Sitting in his car eating McDonald's. Some people don't have to contend with that. Some people don't have to bury their Black and Brown teenage children because they've been racially profiled. Some people don't have to have the talk with their Black and Brown young men and young women about how to get home safely. Some people don't have to have these conversations. So there's an exalted privilege that happens in the field of social emotional learning. So when I say transformative social emotional learning, I mean that we center equity and excellence. What does that mean? We don't ignore realities, but we build hope. We build self-confidence. We build an awareness of what is against people of marginalized and oppressed and minoritized groups. We let them know it's a game out here. There are people who have been set out to deliberately destroy you. There are traps set up against you, but guess what? There is something greater in you, and we're going to pull you into a space of awareness where you see that you're a genius, where you know that you're Black and beautiful, where you know that all the things in society and on social media that want to demonize your beautiful brown and Black skin, your kinky and coily hair, the way you speak in African American vernacular English, that is a beautiful expression of metaphorical language, of figurative language, that wants to demonize that and say that's bad English. We want to build up a confidence in you that says you are beautiful because you are you. So we take you through self-awareness. We take you through self-management because we don't want you to be only a reactor. We're moving you into a space of, I don't want to say controlling, but managing your own emotions, right? Being aware of the emotions that are inside of you, understanding what your triggers are, understanding what your trauma is, and being cognitively aware of how to manage those things. So in that amygdala, you've got to work through transformative social emotional learning. It can't be, Dina Simmons talks about white supremacy with a hug. That's not my phrase. That's the beautiful Black woman, Dina Simmons of Liberated SEL. And she says that this kind of social emotional learning that's coming out that ignores the very social context, oppression, marginalization, blatant racism, blatant violence against Black and brown folks is white supremacy with a hug. So that's why we say transformative SEL. Because if your SEL work is not transformative, you are perpetuating an environment of white supremacy. There is no neutrality in this work. You are either a racist or you're anti-racist. Your silence is your complicitness. Again, there is no neutrality in this work. So when you do this work, you think about in the amygdala, I have to now know that's the fear center of the brain. Zaretta Hammond gives an amazing illustration or analogy that it's a guard dog. Because when those messages come into the brain, not only are they going to work through the memory centers of the brain, the first thing they're going to do and say, stop, is this a threat or an opportunity? Is this a threat or an opportunity? So in the classroom, where you could say, this is an opportunity to learn, if the student perceives that this is an opportunity for them to be embarrassed, humiliated, talked about or bullied, not be empowered, because especially for young people, adolescent age, that's like 12, really 11, 12, on up to graduating high school. Having power is important. That's why you have power struggles with your teenagers, because they want to be independent while they still have to depend on you. It's crazy, but that's just the way we were like that. The next generation is going to be the same, but they're moving into this space of wanting to have their own identity and learning who they are, but also wanting to have power over who they are. So if we're not creating situations in our classrooms where students have a choice and a voice on what they learn and how they learn, are you sitting in spaces? I question teachers in moments of our critical self-reflection, because critical self-reflection is a large part of this work. It's soul work. What I do in schools and with districts, even with culturally responsive leadership, because I've done leadership training as well. And it's important to understand leaders have a bigger obligation, but they're not being supported in the best ways for their growth. But if you're not operating in a criticality mindset that is consistently reflecting on your positionality, your privilege, and your power, you will perpetrate and enact white supremacy culture within the way you teach, within the way you do schooling, within the way you engage with your colleagues, within the way you engage with families, because teacher attitudes make a difference. It's not enough to say, I just get up there and teach. No, teaching is soul work. It comes from within. If you believe the kids in front of you are capable of doing the work, you do what it takes to make sure your instruction meets them where they are. But if you don't believe, if you only see the deficits and not the strengths, if you only look at what's on the surface and not get to know students at the core of their souls, then you won't engage in the real soul work. And so with this SEL work, thank y'all for the questions. With this SEL work, there are two ways that it should be enacted. Well, really three. But in the classroom, there is a direct modeling, teaching of SEL, right? And you always need to start with self-awareness. But there's a direct teaching. This is what we're working on for about, they say at least 15 minutes. At least, because we know we got other stuff to do, right? We know that we have other content. We know that the culture pushes these standardized testing, and I roll my eyes deliberately because there's a whole thought behind the racism and inherent biases within standardized testing, but that's for another day. But at least 15 minutes every day. It could look different. It could be partner conversations. It could be journaling. It could be restorative circles. It could be a myriad of opportunities. It could be going outside and enjoying nature while you reflect, while you bring forth these ideas. It could be watching clips, video clips. It could be a myriad of things, but it has to be directly taught. So today we're working on empathy. Empathy, many people believe it's like a common sense. You should just feel that. It's not a brain thing. People have to be taught. Research has shown that empathy is a skill that must be taught. It is not inherent within us as human beings. So this thought that people should be a certain way has to be thrown out the window. You have to understand as an educator, people who work with teachers, with students, and those who work with teachers, right? But even people who, wherever you are, if you're in a human-facing environment where you're working with other humans on a large scale basis continuously, understanding that everybody's experiences are what shape them. And I mean, their experiences that could have been trauma, their experiences that also could have been a mentor, right? So they got that tragic or that traumatic or just that really stressful, right? It's levels to trauma. It could have been something really stressful. They have that situation, but they have a buffer. They had somebody in their corner, even if they were experiencing neglect at home. They had a teacher, they had a coach, they had somebody in their corner. And in the brain, that's a buffer. It lessens or mitigates the impact of stress on the brain, right? Because trauma responsiveness is important in social emotional learning work, because you have to be aware of how not to be a trigger, how to recognize body language, how to be in tune with the soul of your students. But that comes from building relationships. So again, back to the amygdala and this threat or this guard center of the brain. The way that because what happens is when the brain detects a threat, any kind of threat, physical, emotional, whatever, the brain will not engage. If there are no other strategies to overcome that threat, especially with our young people who are learning how to deal with conflict. We got grown folks who can't get past threats. Imagine what our young people, where they are. But if your brain is in that state, this is where you hear the words fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. FAWN, meaning people pleasing. And that's the cute response to trauma that a lot of people ignore, because that's a compliant student. That's a student who's doing what I asked them to do. That's a student who's always on task, and that's harder to see. It's harder to see. But that trauma comes from, I can't run from it and I can't fix it. So I'm going to try my best to make it better. Even though this is not my situation, right? Even though this is not my problem to solve, I'm going to people please my way out of this conflict. So the brain can't creatively, like literally, I'm not saying something that I'm hypothesizing. The member of your brain, the organ of your brain is unable, when it's in a heightened sense of stress and a threat, unable to problem solve, unable to creatively think, unable to imagine. See, these are all things that happen in the neocortex. That's up here, this part. But if you can't get past the amygdala and that guard dog is barking, all this cortisol is being released in the brain. So it's so much fear. Fear looks like head down, hoods on, hoodies on, AirPods, headphones in the ear, being aloof. See, we tend to focus on the behavior that's really loud when students are talking to each other and off task. That's a response. That's a fear response. Or when students are combative with the teacher. That's a fear response. I taught over 10 years. I could tell when students were arguing or wanting to argue with me, because I always told kids I don't argue with children. We can have a conversation. I'll help problem solve. I don't argue with children. But when we get into that, I could tell, oh, when I had a one-on-one, when I got to look at their work, when I got a little bit more invested in the student as an individual, I could tell the skill set to do what I was asking wasn't there. And so how do I avoid the embarrassment? I'd rather exert my power through being deviant or being defiant or being blatantly disrespectful. And teachers who don't know this will get upset and their ego and pride will rise up. And it will say, this is my classroom. You're going to have to get up out of here. I got my degree. You trying to get yours. All these phrases that we hear and that we say. I've said some of them myself before I learned more about this thing called schooling, education, teaching, and learning. But a culturally responsive teacher has a relationship with this child. Where even, because the ones I had the closest relationships with still would pop off, things would happen, but I would pull them to the side. We would have a conversation, and I would forgive them and welcome them back into the space and give them tools on how to deal with the stress. Prepare them before they got to the board, right? Prepare them before they got to the board so they could know and be more confident and avoid the release of cortisol, the fear hormone. And you know how to combat that? You got oxytocin, you got dopamine, you got serotonin. Teachers don't know. And I say teachers as a whole because I see so many of our students experiencing educational trauma and neglect. They're falling through the cracks. I've got students I've taught charged for murder. They fell through the cracks. We as an educational system have failed many of our students. Just saw in the news, I'm in Arkansas, a 13-year-old is charged with murdering another 13-year-old. 13? They're falling through the cracks. This is a state of emergency. The information I'm talking about when I talk about instructional equity is not just something to make people feel good. This is life and death. Because when students don't feel as though they are in a space of belonging within the classroom, it leads them to other deviant behaviors. It leads them to find spaces of belonging, let alone if they don't feel like they belong at home. They're experiencing trauma there. They're experiencing abuse and neglect, poverty. They're experiencing all the things there. Then they get to school. They don't have a retrieve there. Where do they go? Some of them go to the streets. Some of them find older people who don't have emotional intelligence, resilience, maturity, and are still doing things that are foolish for adults, that are immature. They lead them into a path that is not conducive for the growth of our next generation. So us as educators have a charge. We have a great responsibility, but educators need to be supported. I don't put all this on the back of our teachers because a lot of our teachers are doing their best. But these PDs that are watered down, that won't speak to the truth of the matter, these PDs that could have been an email, these professional, and when I say PDs for those that are not in education, professional development sessions, these PDs that are led by white folks who don't know how to work with Black folks, none of it's making sense. These PDs that are a waste of people's time that only focus on standardized data. So now we commodify our Black students to a test score. Your worth is in a data point. My sister Shauna Brown with Teach for the Culture says that she got t-shirts. Students are more than a data point. They are whole living souls, whole human beings who deserve for us, the adults, to do the work in growing our capacity to help them be empowered, meaning the power is in them. For them to be empowered, to have the tools, to have the strategies, to have the keys, but to also have the support. Not always getting written up for everything. Not always getting sent out of the classroom, which is an infringement upon their rights to a free education. So now you're taking away their rights to the education because they got to go in the hallway because they're disrupting your classroom. instead of it being their classroom. See, when we work through restorative practices, when we work through transformative social emotional learning, we create environments where students take ownership. They act up in your class because they feel like they're a visitor. And they don't know how to act when they go to people's houses. They don't get that. So they are a visitor. They're not at home. They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe enough to be brave, to be curious, to take intellectual risk. Learning is a risk, especially when you're in front of your friends, because no one wants to be deemed stupid. No one feels like making errors is a part of learning. So I could go on and on about growth mindset within our context and within the field and work of equity and education. But I want to just leave us with my starting point about instructional equity. Educators need the support. If you're an administrator and you're watching, you're listening, it don't have to be me. It can be anybody. But if they're not talking about the brain and culture, my formula is culture plus cognition. If they're not incorporating those into the work, you're not going to see the change you want. You're going to teach strategies and not mindset and environment. Because think about flowers, think about plants. They only grow and flourish in the right environment. So we have to think about, are we cultivating an environment where, number one, our teachers, our people who are in direct contact with our young people are nourished? They can't pour from empty cups. Are we giving them more and more and more and more and expecting them to be all these things and not respecting their time at home, expecting them to work after hours, expecting them to have all these extra duties and they don't even have time to use the restroom? Are we expecting this martyrdom? We want them to be martyrs for the sake of the kids. So we have to push past that. And so your professional development plans must be centered around culturally responsive teaching, not just relevant, because relevant says get some books by Black authors, put some Black characters in there, talk about social justice, have a multicultural classroom. That's not going to be everything you need. You need to know how to provide instructional equity so that you make a difference in the brain, which will show up in the way you do teaching and learning. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. That was so insightful. All the things that you were saying brought up so many things for me. So thank you for doing this awesome work. We have a couple of questions in the comment.
Yeah.
So we have one from Princess Washington. She says, if my child were to participate in SEL, how would I measure his or her success?
That's a good question, because I think we have been trained, especially as teachers and people, to prize numerical data, right? So we want to be able to see, oh, they started at this score, now they're here. This is soul work. So what this means is you have to be connected to that child to notice differences. How do you notice differences? So some things I work with educators on is having non-academic conversations, one-on-one conversations, taking notes if you feel like you need to, and noticing the shift in language, attitude, disposition, how much they are taking ownership over the work. Notice all these things. And what you would say is a good student, one who comes in, who is motivated, who's engaged. Notice the before and notice how they're growing towards that. And that is your measure of success. It's not going to be, now let me tell you this and I'll stop. You can also see it show up in their academic scores. So look at their test scores. You just can't say I'm making them feel good and they're going to automatically do better in math. It doesn't work like that, but it's a great part of the fertilizer. You still got to have great instruction. You can't get around that.
No, that is definitely true. And so I know you were saying that I believe your program is for K through 12. Is that correct?
Socially, she was asking what grades do those lessons, are they generally taught? And even in pre-K, y'all know they do it real good in pre-K. Be kind and share your tool. They do it great with the babies, but it goes all the way up into 12th grade.
That's what I was going to ask. And so, like, how is the parent involvement? Because I know that, as educators, we can do as much as we can, to do the soul teaching. Because I love the way that you just broke this down and brought in the biology and the science in it. Like, it's beautiful and it's a real thing. Like you said, it's a life or death for our children, and
Correct.
so we have to meet them where they're at and really focus our education towards that. So how do you get the parents involved where they understand the severity of this? Because what is it, the school to prison pipeline is a real thing, and some
Correct.
parents don't really understand the severity of it. So how do we get them to really say, let's all get on board, because it takes a village, and with all the work that you're doing, it's like we don't want it to be in vain. We want it to be a full circle. So how do we do that? Because I'm a daycare provider and I struggle with that. I'm working little ones, and it's a blessing, it's an honor. But at the same time, I see the struggle with parents, because I always say, I can't want more for your child than you want for your child.
Right.
So for me, what do I do?
Well, I would say there's a line of work out here by another Black woman scholar. When I tell you the Black women scholars are amazing. Her name is Dr. Karen Mapp, and she partnered with the U.S. Department of Education to do this work in the Harvard School of Education as well. And she looks at it, it's called dual capacity framework. There are videos of her talking, doing talks, and there's some PDFs that shows her framework. But I'll just give the very brief part of the beginning, is that we have to understand it's a dual, what do you want to say, methodology or pathway towards this, right? First, we have to see where our parents are coming from, because most parents, even the most neglectful or the most, whatever our judgments about their parenting styles, most parents want the best for their children. It may show up differently, but most of them want the best. And then the best may also be defined differently. So this is where I do this work. I did it last week when I was in Philadelphia. Listening leads to liberation. So there has to be a space where we have opportunities to stop and slow down and have meaningful conversations with parents and families and caregivers to actually understand what was their experience like in school. How do they perceive school to even be? A lot of times when I was working in the district, parents would be pissed off at the front office because the secretaries had the nastiest attitudes. And then that perpetuated a cycle of every time I come to this school. So now they ready to argue with the assistant principal. They ready to argue with the teachers. Not that they always believe their children are angels, but there's a contention, and it's parents versus the school. It may not even be that specific school. It may be education. I talked about this in my conversation, that there's educational trauma and neglect. So we need to know the stories of the people and the parents and the families that we're working with. So an idea could be to have a parent talk, like where you just either one-on-one, or you have these parent nights or these family nights or these caregiver nights, because we do have to understand that family looks different. Everybody is not raised by parents. It could be aunts or whomever. But you get in circle and you ask them, what was your experience like when you were in elementary? Was it all good? Or when did it start getting messed up for you? That will give you insight into their attitudes about it and let you know, oh, there's a trigger here. So you don't go in triggering what's already there, right?
Right. Exactly. So I want to ask you a personal question. So what brought you into this line of work?
I've been teaching more than 10 years, and I started teaching in Memphis, Tennessee. And I taught all of our students were on free and reduced lunch. So that means that all of our students were classified as experiencing poverty. And we had all Black students, maybe like less than 5 white students and Latino students. So it was all Black students. And it was really hard in that context, because I had a great mentor, amazing Black woman, Delnita Mickey. I will say her name every time. She's amazing. And she's now a principal but she was my coach. And there were times I would go to her crying because kids can be rough. Like I did middle school. And
Ooh.
those jokers was like, they don't hold back. They will and in Memphis, they called it checking. They'll check you, talk about you bad, have you feeling like the low. Don't think you coming in there cute. Oh, honey, they would bring you down to size, right? And so I had to learn because I didn't go through a teacher prep program. So
Okay.
I learned like the value of having mentorship and having support, but I also saw that we weren't getting the resources other schools were getting. And I also saw our kids were like, I had 8th grade kids who were reading on 2nd grade level. I was like, what is happening? What is going on? And so in my dissertation, I did culturally responsive teaching. That's what I researched. Even after my dissertation, I did a research project with educators in Denmark, Copenhagen, which is in Europe, and they're experiencing, they were brown, which is Middle Eastern. They were experiencing the same inequities, and they got a Black Lives Matter crew over there. Like they're experiencing all the same things in different ways that we're experiencing here. And it was just like, for me, I love kids. I take kids, on HBCU college tours every year. We're going somewhere in November. We're going to go to Southern. I love working with kids, but I was like, you know what? It's the grown folks. Grown people are the ones that need the support the most, because some of them are engaging our students in trauma and making them hate school, making them hate learning, and we've got to shift there. So that's why I moved into instructional coaching, and then I moved into my own business, and now I do that full time in consulting with schools and districts and even organizations, nonprofits that kind of connect with diverse communities.
Well, you definitely need to get in connection with our Oakland Unified, our San Francisco Unified School District, because we need this for our children, because our children are suffering. And what you're doing is phenomenal work. And the soul teaching is beautiful. I never heard that term before, but the way that you broke it down, I'm just like, I want to be a part of it. I want to. So I'm going to look at the link tree and see how I can get some training from you, because, I want to give back and do the best that I can with my little ones, because like you said, it starts at birth, actually during conception, and so just thank you for all the awesome work that you're doing. I'm so happy that you made it on the show tonight to just give this valuable information to our community. Any last words you have for the community before we head out?
The last thing I'll say is that in order to engage in this work and really see the change that we want to see in our young people and in our education system and in our communities, you got to do the work on you first. You got to realize how your souls are intertwined and how deep the connection is to white supremacy culture, perfectionism, defensiveness, the right to comfort, paternalism. All these things are in us all until you start unlearning, unpacking, and self-excavating. So do the soul work so that you can do the soul work with your students, with our young people, because they need us to do this work with them, to share power with them, not hoard it over them. So I take teachers through this kind of process. So she puts the link tree here. We're starting our second cohort. The last one was amazing. I had a teacher from California, Washington, all over the country, New York, Texas, Tennessee, and Illinois. And they came into this 4-week cohort, and I do an hour of coaching. I do lesson planning, and I help teachers to be culturally responsive. Like, what does that look like when I get to my classroom? Like, not just the talk, even though that's important. Conversations are important. But how can I do this? By building alliances with my students who I feel like are really far behind. And how do I do it in my lesson plans and connecting with families? So that's what we got coming up November the 5th. So sign up.
Yes, sign up, everyone. You are absolutely right. Our children are our future, and it's up to us adults to get ourselves in order and in line so that we can give them the best possible, so that they can be the best individuals, to lead this nation, because they're our future. So
Yeah.
thank you again, community. Tune in next Tuesday. I'm sorry, on Sunday, actually, we have our domestic violence segment. So tune in. Thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Battles, for all of your
Thank you
awesome
so much.
work. You all check out her link tree, get registered for those classes, because us adults, we have to take a stance and really make a difference for our youth. So thank you again, and have an awesome night.
Thank y'all. Good night.
Thank you.